So this guy made this video called "The Largest Campaign Ever to Stop Publishers," and I guess he also means developers from destroying games. And I want to go ahead and start off by saying I don't entirely disagree with this guy and what he's saying, but I do disagree with his approach, the reason he's doing it, and how he wants to do it, because first off, he wants to apply all these rules not just progressively, but retroactively, meaning he wants to apply these to all games that have ever existed, simply because The Crew was taken offline, which is just one game. I understand the frustration with games being taken offline that you love. This has happened probably to everyone at some point in their life. I mean, for God's sakes, Toontown is never coming back. Let's just be honest. But that's just how some games are designed. We all know that one day, if not enough people are paying Blizzard to play World of Warcraft, that one day they will just shut down World of Warcraft. In fact, they planned on shutting down World of Warcraft a long time ago. It was only planned to last 10 years and then shut down. This is just how many games are designed to work, especially online MMOs. And in previous videos, he said that those games are a pass, which I don't know if he wants to apply here, but he didn't clarify on. You can't just say certain games are a pass if we're going to pass a law for all games, especially if we're passing it retroactively. Also, we can't be asking for ridiculous things, like for the above to not be superseded by end-user license agreements. End-user license agreements are for you to agree to the legal terms that have legally been allowed for the company to write out for you to agree to. So if we were to pass a law that just didn't allow developers to destroy games intentionally, then we wouldn't even need the end user license, because there would need to be no agreement. They would, by law, have to not destroy their games intentionally. Now here's the thing with that. You can't just expect game developers to not destroy their games, because again, they do it intentionally sometimes. Just like I said with World of Warcraft and with Toontown and any other MMO, they intentionally make these games knowing that they won't last and stay online forever. I understand that The Crew was a little bit different here. You could play it single player offline or something, I believe, but this also comes into play with other games like Microsoft Flight Simulator. Microsoft Flight Simulator, you have to connect to the internet so that you can see lots of different things streaming in and loading in and out. So some of these games can't even be programmed the way that he wants, to where they would just work offline magically. I understand his frustration again, but that's the way a lot of these games work, even sometimes when they're single player, because they're using something that connects to the internet. Now, of course, they could work around and program it out, but that may take time. And he says in this video that he asked a developer that it could take a few hours to a few days, and yes, I'm a developer, it could take a few hours to a few days. Depending on how the code is made though, and how the application's made and who's doing it, it could take a few weeks, because they might need to understand the code base first. They might need to understand the hundreds and hundreds of lines of code, if not thousands of lines usually, sometimes hundreds of thousands of lines in AAA games of code that there are, to fix it and make it the way you want it to. Just as a side note, as I'm editing here, what if they can't edit it out? What if they can't code it out? You need to understand that games are all designed differently. Some of these games may be designed in such a way that the network just constantly needs everything connected to the internet because they coded it just to work online only. That may be something that just can't be undone. Again, you need to understand that how a game works offline and how a game works online is completely different, and how a game developer approaches that can be completely different than any other game developer. So the ways to go about this aren't exactly as straightforward as you might think. And this is why it's so important going forward with the plan I'm about to explain, that we do these things progressively and not retroactively. Now, the other thing he says here is,
now, one thing we left off the table, but it's kind of an open secret we'd be willing to compromise on, or at least I would be if a company doesn't fix the game, but they give you all the information, tools, software, and so on, so that a programmer could be reasonably expected to get it working again.
Okay, so here's the problem with that. He doesn't understand that to have all of the tools, software, and etc. to make it working again, you're going to need the engine. And usually these games are made with proprietary engines. The Crew was made on the Babel engine. Actually, I thought it was the Dunani engine, but the Babel engine. It's not a publicly available engine. They're not going to give this out to people just because we want their game back and because we want to fix it. I don't think many people understand this. You need the engine to modify the game. A lot of people have argued with me, well, how do other games get modified then when they don't have the engine, when they don't have any of the source code? You can decompile the game. There are ways to decompile games. And if you ever watch a video by Matt CK, you would know that decompiling almost any game that isn't fully encrypted or has its variables encrypted is extremely easy, because all you need to do is know machine code, which is not very simple. But someone who does know machine code like Matt CK can use a decompiler, go through all of the code, and rebuild all of the variables, and do basically anything they want to the game, albeit much, much slower than a game developer could in a game engine. Let me repeat that. Much, much, much slower than a game developer could in a game engine. So if you want them to release the instructions on how to fix the game, you need to learn how to decompile games and code like a professional decompiler like Matt CK is. Otherwise, they need to release the game engine along with not just the game engine, but here, I'll show you my game, the project files to the game. This wouldn't just require the game engine, it would also require them releasing the project files. Now, here's another catch-22 that this guy doesn't understand about game development that he didn't ask anyone. The assets in these game files are not always owned by the game developer or publisher. Let me repeat that. The assets in these game files are not always owned by the game developers or publishers. They are usually licensed, just like your video games are licensed to you. We have the right to use them and do almost whatever we want with them besides redistribute them, which would be piracy, just like you do not have the right to install a video game, archive it, and then post it on torrent, because that would be piracy. That's against the law. When you are licensed something, I don't think people get this, you have the right to use it, but you do not have the right to own the things that actually made it. You have the right to the product that you bought, the copy that you bought. When I go to finish my game, I go to my build settings and click build. It's a little bit different for every game engine. It might be export or whatever, and I'll just do here a test file and I'll click build, and then it will build the game from the engine and the project files, export it out to a built game that I can then sell. You are buying that built game. You are not buying the game engine. You are not buying the project files. In many cases, I and other game developers cannot sell you the project files because, again, I was licensed most of the project files, a lot, or at least a lot of them. I didn't make all of them. So a lot of the art assets in this game are not made by me. I do not have rights to redistribute them, while I do have rights to build them in my game, because I am not actually redistributing the assets themselves. You see? So when I go into my game and I go into my assets, the game assets, the actual models and stuff, like, let me see, where's a models file here? Folder, got tons of them. The actual models and stuff are still in my engine and still in my project files. You don't get these. You get the game. All you get is the exe and some other stuff to go with it, but mainly the exe in the game. You don't get all these project files. So if you do learn how to decompile, you can do what Matt CK did and decompile a game. Now here's what you don't know about decompiling games that Matt CK does. He didn't re-release anything that he did with his decompilations because they are licensed. Again, he doesn't have the rights to redistribute what he does with Lego Island. So again, even if you want to revive games, there can be licensing issues. Now, there are third-party loopholes to this, to where you can make a mod like he did. I think he made a mod, and you can install the mod that works on top of the game to then modify the game. That's a third-party loophole that allows you around it, but you can't do that otherwise. In other words, he got around this because he released a mod which wasn't redistributing any of the game itself. He only redistributed the files you need to then modify the game itself. So because he wasn't redistributing the actual game and he was releasing a mod to change the game, he had circumvented pretty much everything. And so in case you're a bit confused by what I'm saying, how do you make a mod that modifies the game without actually modifying the game? I have a mod here called OpenRCT2. It's for Roller Coaster Tycoon 1 and 2, and it lets me mod the game without actually running the game itself. I run the mod and then it launches the game. And now I have Roller Coaster Tycoon 2 in full screen and full resolution. Now, the reason I can do this And the reason they can distribute this folder that I have with the mod in it is because the game files aren't in here. They aren't actually breaking any laws by distributing this software that modifies the game. Because it's not illegal to modify your game. It's just illegal to modify it and then try to sell it again. You can't redistribute or even redistribute it for free. You can't redistribute stuff for free, because that's piracy. And there are all sorts of instances where people have even gone to prison for a year for redistributing something for free because you're still breaking the law. And I fully understand that this isn't an argument that we should be allowed to take any old game and decompile it and change it and redistribute as ours or resell it, but we also shouldn't be allowed to just take anyone's artwork and decompile it, strip it from the game, and redistribute, because people actually worked on that art. And I've had people argue with me, say, well, if that's how licensing works, then licensing needs to change for video games. Here's the problem. This isn't how licensing works just for video games. This is how licensing works for basically everything in digital media. You may recall GTA, the re-release, a lot of the music artists didn't have rights for the game anymore because the licensing fees were too high for Rockstar to renew them. They could renew them, they were just too high. They didn't want to pay the money. And then a lot of people complained that, oh, Rockstar didn't want to pay the money. Yeah, they didn't want to. I'm not going to pay it either. I don't want to pay whoever it was for their 30-year-old song so that they can get another $10 million or whatever it is. That's on Rockstar. They decided that, hey, these license agreements with these songs ended. These people want insane amounts of money because we're a big video game company and they think we have an endless pool of cash, but we have employees to pay actually. So they decided we would rather keep paying our employees and making great video games and just leave a few songs out of our remasters. Boo-hoo. So we can't decompile and fix the games unless we make a mod that does it. That's one solution we have. So that right there is a solution, just period. We could just decompile and release mods for all these broken games and fix them. That's literally a solution. It's just the problem is you don't understand, you're not a programmer and you're using theory and not actual computer science to solve these problems. And it's not as simple as you might think it is in your brain. Another solution I have, since people can't be asked to learn programming, I know that's crazy, right? All the ridiculous things, or be asked to, stop playing the games that are games for service that you don't like. That's also too ridiculous to ask for. Another solution would be actually pass some legislation that clear as day says game developers and publishers cannot release games that are intentionally self-destroying themselves. That means they cannot release games with code that intentionally ruins the experience of the game. That is something that you made a valid point about in games for services. Now, the problem with passing some sort of legislation that stops game developers from intentionally destroying their game with code is some games, like I've said before, are designed like that. The games that you want to just give a pass on in your previous videos, like World of Warcraft or I guess iRacing because it charges a subscription. But that's not how the law works. You have to work with the law or around the law, not against the law. And so this is my plan. Does the game have single player? Yes. We'll proceed to the next question. If not, too bad. It's an online experience only. Again, we have to be reasonable. We can't be asking games like iRacing and World of Warcraft to adhere to these rules retroactively. Next question. Does the single player mode require online connection? If yes, the online connection must be removed before removing the game from service, before it's no longer sold anymore. This would give game developers and publishers time before the end of their development cycle, before they finish making money on the game, to decide when they need to update the game and patch it so that it can be playable offline. This is an actual reasonable request we can make because they are still working on the game. They haven't given up on it. They're still making money on it. They're still profiting to then release a patch to make the single player not require online. If it does not require online, great. It should work with no changes and it shouldn't need to be modified. Now here's a little caveat to that. What do we consider being online and being offline? Because games like Counter-Strike are mostly online, but also you can play with bots offline. I would say what we consider single player is anything that can be played without having to connect to another human being Also, I also want to just put Counter-Strike in the limelight here for a second because Counter-Strike 2 replaced Counter-Strike Go. Other people are also upset with games like Overwatch 2 replacing Overwatch. This is something that would force developers like Steam, their developers and publishers actually, force them to preserve the game, hopefully. We should also make a push to not allow digital storefronts like Steam and Epic Games Store and other storefronts to remove games that you have once paid for, because I actually did pay for the first Counter-Strike Go before they made it free, and then they made it Counter-Strike 2. So I no longer have direct access, even though there's like some sort of loophole you can do, I think, to get Counter-Strike Go still working. But they should still that's what I'm saying. They should still require or still offer some sort of way to run the old game, at least in a single player mode. That's what everyone is trying to strive for with these arguments, but we're trying to fight for different things. We need to just keep it simple and keep it do not destroy single player games after they have been sold.
Thanks for watching this video, guys. If you liked it, hit the like button. If you disliked it, hit the dislike button. Please subscribe and hit the bell icon so you don't miss any more future videos.